This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. It may well be the most significant antitrust case against a U.S. company in more than 2 decades, perhaps a century. The U.S. Justice Department announced this morning it is suing Alphabet's Google for alleged antitrust violations, saying the company abuses its power as the world's largest search engine. With us now for more, U.S. Senator from Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn, who has pushed the DOJ to examine Google's power. Now that you have seen the Justice Department suit, Senator, what is your reaction to it? Does it go far enough?
Emily, I think that this is a very firm foundation for the DOJ because, as we have discussed in the past, keeping an innovative and competitive marketplace it's a necessity. And what we know that DOJ is doing is looking at Google's anti-competitive practices. And it's a search, it is search advertising, it is search via text, it is the way they have bundled services and the way they have worked with people like Apple and LG and Motorola and Samsung in order to make Google the default system in phones. So I think as we go through this process, and bear in mind, just like Microsoft's suit took 2 decades to settle, what you're going to see is this is going to take some time. But it is, I think that we're kind of off to the races, if you will, on looking at how to handle big tech and look at how to handle Google's monopoly when you're upwards of 90% of market share, and then you're looking at Bing and Apple and or Bing and DuckDuckGo and Yahoo, and they've each got about 2% market share. Then, you know, it's time to take this look, and I am so pleased we finally see where DOJ was going to come down on this.
So you mentioned the world monopoly there. The DOJ floated the possibility of a structural remedy. Do you think Google needs to be broken up? That would differ from, you know, historical Republican positions on big business.
Yes, it does differ, but I think it is the right conversation to have. And as you know, a couple of weeks ago, we subpoenaed the CEOs of the big tech companies to the Commerce Committee. And primarily that was focusing on privacy and Section 230. And of course, our subpoenas were issued in a unanimous bipartisan vote. And what you're going to see is the antitrust issues also become a part of this discussion. And precisely what the remedy is going to be, no one can give you what that remedy will be. What we do know is that now we can begin to have those discussions and work toward what that remedy ought to be. And Microsoft was handled one way. The Bell companies prior to that were handled another way. So with big tech, we'll see what path we're going to travel on this.
We're getting new details about the special deal that Google had with Apple. Google paying Apple billions of dollars to be the default search engine on Apple devices. We're hearing that the companies, according to the DOJ, worked as one. What do you make of that? 2 powerful tech companies allegedly joining forces in their power to be even more powerful as one company.
Right, and when you look at Google's business practices, their bundling and their deal making, and the way there were payoffs, this is all going to be part of the deeper dive that DOJ is going to do, and we will see what that brings forward. But of course, when you look at their participation with Apple, of course it causes questions, and we should be trying to get some answers to those questions. And because it is all about stifling competition. It is about keeping new entrants out of the marketplace. It's about making it very difficult for somebody else to come into that marketplace and compete with you.
Meantime, you mentioned the subpoenas of big tech CEOs, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey. You are on both the Commerce and the Judiciary committees. What is the status of these subpoenas, and which committee should actually be leading this testimony?
Well, content moderation comes under the jurisdiction of the Commerce Committee. And as I said, those subpoenas were issued almost 3 weeks ago now, and the hearing is set. Now, I will say the CEOs of Google, Facebook, Twitter agreed to come voluntarily after we voted unanimously to issue the subpoenas. So they're coming on the 28th. We are going to begin our hearing that morning, and we will work through our rounds of questions with them. But I think it's going to be a fairly lengthy hearing. There are questions about Section 230. There are questions about data mining. This has risen to be an issue that is really a pretty hot topic with a lot of women, because they have watched the data mining that all of these tech companies and these platforms are doing as more of their everyday functional life has moved online through COVID. Children are going to school. People are conducting their work. They're Zooming and WebExing and Microsoft Meeting. And people are beginning to look at the way they are data mining, the way they're tracking and following, the way they're listening, the way they're prioritizing search, the way they're preferencing certain businesses. And of course, you and I've talked about Google and Yelp and some of those issues in the past. But here's the thing. People in this country feel that they have that right to privacy, and they do. It is in the Bill of Rights. And when they have a company that without permission, just because you're using their service, says, okay, I have the right to look into the virtual you without permission, this is something people want addressed. When they find out that they can't get to articles because they're censored, that is something people say, you have no right to do that. You're an information service. In statute, they're an information.
So, of course, you're referencing, of course, the New York Post article about Joe and Hunter Biden, which, to be fair, has some controversial suggestions, dubious conclusions, questionable sources at best. I do want to know whether you think that the Judiciary or Commerce Committee should be leading on this, and what is the latest on the Judiciary Committee's efforts, in particular, to get these CEOs in front of them?
Right. And Judiciary Committee will at some point take up the vote to issue the subpoenas. It is not going to be something that is done before election. It is something that's going to have to be done in the lame duck. And the censorship issue applies to entertainment. I've got a lot of entertainers in Nashville that have had things that have been censored, Emily. It's not about one article. It is about a practice that is carried out by content moderators for these big tech companies who exercise their opinions. It's about algorithms that are manipulated to boot out certain content. And if you're going to be the public square, be the public square. If you're going to be a news service, hire a news editor. But it's time for us to put these rules of the road in place.
All questions you can put to the CEOs next week. Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn, thanks so much for joining us. Always good to have you here on the program.